My name is Camille, and if I had to describe my childhood in one word, it would be invisible, not in the tragic, cinematic way where someone is totally ignored or locked away, but in the more painful way where you're there, but never truly seen. My parents had this way of looking right through me, as if I were just a blurry outline in the frame, while my sister Emily stood sharp and gleaming in the foreground. She was their golden girl from the moment she learned to walk in a straight line, straight A's, varsity cheerleading, homecoming queen, college acceptance letters lined up like trophies. They worshipped her, and I don't mean that lightly. Every dinner table conversation was about her test scores, her performances, her goals. Every fridge magnet held her accomplishments. My report cards might as well have been invisible ink. I wasn't a bad kid. I didn't do drugs, I didn't sneak out, I didn't yell or rebel. I just didn't shine the way they wanted me to. I was quiet. I liked books that made me think, not test prep guides. I liked solitude, not the stage. I asked questions they didn't have patience to answer. I saw the world differently, and somehow, that became synonymous with failure in their eyes. I didn't fit the image they had in mind, so they boxed me up into something lesser, a disappointment. I remember once I couldn't have been older than 14, I came home excited about a woodworking project I finished in shop class. I'd spent weeks on it. I was proud. I placed it on the kitchen counter like it was a gift. My father barely glanced at it before saying, "Why aren't you doing something useful, like SAT prep?" My mother nodded, stirring her tea. Emily walked a minute later with a B+ in AP chemistry, and they acted like she'd won a Nobel Prize. I quietly carried the wooden sculpture to my room and never brought my projects out again. They weren't cruel outright, not in a way people would notice. That's what made it worse. They didn't yell or hit. They dismissed, ignored, shrugged. They had this practiced way of redirecting every moment back to Emily, like she was the axis of the household. And I spun somewhere out in the cold, orbiting a family that never truly opened its arms to me. By the time I was 17, I had already learned how to disappear in a crowded room. I didn't try to win their approval anymore, I just stopped caring out loud. Inside, of course, I still ached. You can't unlove your parents, but you can unhoped, and that's what I did. I stopped hoping for their praise, their attention, their warmth. I let it go like smoke through my fingers, and yet deep down, something in me still waited, still wanted to be seen. I just didn't know how or when, or if it would ever happen. By the time senior year rolled around, college applications became the entire ecosystem of our house. You couldn't go 5 minutes without someone mentioning GPA, scholarships, essay prompts, or which Ivy League school Emily was favoring this week. The pressure in the air was so thick it felt like you had to cut through it just to breathe. I didn't bother talking about my plans. I knew the script by heart. If it didn't end in a degree, a title, or a 6-figure salary, it wasn't valid to them. But the truth was, I already knew what I wanted. It had been building in me for years, quiet and steady like a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. I wanted to enlist, not because I was running away or trying to prove something, at least not consciously. I wanted purpose. I wanted structure, something bigger than myself, something that wasn't measured by GPAs or dinner party bragging rights. I wanted to serve, to grow, to build a version of myself no one could belittle. I remember sitting at the dinner table one night, listening to Emily talk about her campus tour at Stanford. She had a new hoodie, a whole color-coded folder of notes, and my parents were eating it up like gospel. I waited until she finished, then cleared my throat. My hands were sweating under the table. I said, "I've made my decision too." They looked at me like I had suddenly learned to speak Latin. "Oh," my dad said, raising an eyebrow. "Finally applying somewhere?" I shook my head. "I'm enlisting." Army. The silence that followed was immediate and crushing. My mom's face froze. My dad's mouth curled just slightly, the way it does when he's trying not to say something he considers beneath him. "You're kidding," he said. But I wasn't. That's not a career, my mom muttered. That's a way out for people who don't have options. My stomach turned. It's not a backup plan. It's what I want. They didn't believe me. Or worse, they did, and it only deepened their disappointment. That night, we didn't talk again. The next morning, there was no good luck, no questions, no curiosity, just an empty hallway when I left for school. From that day on, something shifted in our home. They still talked to me, sure, but the warmth was gone. Invitations to family gatherings started to go missing. My name got left off group texts. Emily would tell me afterward that mom said I probably wouldn't come anyway, since I was so busy playing soldier. My father started referring to my enlistment as a phase, a detour, a mistake I'd outgrow, but I didn't. I shipped out weeks after graduation. No farewell party, no hugs, just a quick, clipped "take care of yourself" from my mother at the curb. She didn't get out of the car. My dad didn't come at all. As the bus pulled away, I stared out the window, trying to feel sad. Instead, I felt clear, not light, not happy, but certain, like I was finally doing something that belonged to me, not to their plans, their dreams, their expectations. It was the day I stopped being their daughter and started becoming something else entirely. Basic training didn't care about who your parents were, how many AP classes you took, or whether anyone ever told you they were proud of you. It stripped you down literally, emotionally, spiritually. The first few weeks felt like I had landed on another planet. Early mornings that bled into late nights, screaming instructors, aching muscles, endless repetition. At first, it wasn't even the physical pain that got to me, it was the mental noise. My mind clung to old voices, the ones I thought I'd left behind. My mother's dismissive sighs, my father's contempt, Emily's polished smile when I told her I'd enlisted. Their silence had followed me here, buried under the cadence calls and rifle drills. But it was still there. I didn't talk much. I listened, watched. I paid attention to who broke first, who got back up faster, who kept going even when no one was watching. I learned to match my breath with the rhythm of my boots on the ground. I memorized every command, every step. My body began to change. So did my mind. I could feel it in the way I stood, the way I looked people in the eye. One night, weeks into training, I sat on my bunk after lights out, legs aching, dog tags resting against my collarbone. My bunkmate, Ramos, looked over at me and said, "You don't talk much, but you've got this look, like you've been fighting longer than most of us." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, because she was right. The fight hadn't started here. It had started around dinner tables and under report card comments and in birthday parties where I got gift cards while Emily got diamond pendants. The instructors didn't praise me often, no one got that luxury. But when they did, it meant something. A nod, a well done, a name called first during drills. And for the first time in my life, I started to believe that maybe I was good at something that mattered. Not just good, reliable, solid, respected. I got used to the grind. I even started to crave it. There was something comforting about the clarity of it all. You give what you have. You push past your limits. You don't look for applause. You earn every inch. There were no masks here, no illusions of perfection. Just sweat, grit, and a kind of quiet pride I'd never known before. And then something unexpected happened. I started to feel proud of myself, not because someone else told me I should be, but because I had survived every damn day that tried to break me, because I was becoming someone I could count on, even if no one else ever had. I wrote my parents once during that time, a short note, polite but distant. I told them I was doing well. That training was hard, but I was learning a lot. I didn't ask how they were. I didn't say I missed them. They never wrote back, and strangely, that was the first time it didn't crush me. If basic training was the crucible, deployment was the fire. I'd thought I knew hard, thought I'd seen enough cold stares and sleepless nights to understand what pressure really felt like. But nothing prepared me for the moment we touched down in the middle of a sun-bleached desert. the heat wrapping around us like a warning, and the reality setting in that this wasn't a drill. This wasn't training anymore. This was real. My first deployment blurred together in fragments. The whine of helicopters overhead, the constant rattle of gear against my back, the static in my gums, the faces of the people I served with tired, alert, always watching. You learn quickly that fear doesn't disappear. It just gets tucked into your vest, somewhere between your ammo and your resolve. I was afraid. Not all the time, but enough to remember I was still human. But I kept moving. That's the thing about war, it teaches you to move, even when everything in you wants to freeze. I was part of a unit tasked with high-risk recon and extraction. We were sent into places where maps went blank and rules got murky. We lost people. We mourned fast and hard and quiet. There wasn't time for anything else. I learned how to shoot, how to command, how to make decisions when hesitation could mean a body on the ground. I saw things I still don't talk about, not because I'm trying to be dramatic, but because some memories are just carved too deep to shape into words. But I rose. Maybe because I had something to prove. Maybe because I didn't trust anyone else to hold the line. Or maybe because deep down, I was still carrying every ounce of rejection I'd ever felt, and I was turning it into something that no one could ever take from me. I earned promotions slowly at first, then faster. Sergeant, staff sergeant. I began leading missions. Not because I asked to, because others trusted me to. That was the difference. I wasn't begging to be seen anymore. I was needed. And in that need, I found belonging. There were moments when it hit me, brief, quiet ones. Like after a successful op, when the adrenaline wore off and I sat alone under a foreign sky, staring up at stars that looked nothing like the ones back home. I'd wonder if my parents were even aware I was out here, if they'd ever think of me when the news reported casualties, if they even knew my rank, my sacrifices, my growth. But those thoughts didn't linger as long as they used to. I'd trained myself to let them pass, just like I let go of the need to explain myself. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, not anymore. Still, I kept every promotion notice, every medal, every commendation letter, not to prove anything to them, but to remind me that even when no one believed in me, even when the people who were supposed to love me didn't bother to try, I didn't give up. I became someone worth knowing, even if they never would. Promotions in the military don't come with parades. They come with paperwork, training, scrutiny, and long hours in rooms where your decisions carry real weight. The higher you climb, the quieter the congratulations get. I stopped looking for cheers a long time ago. I didn't need them. What I needed, what I wanted, was to lead well, to serve well, to build something solid where no one could tear it down or say it didn't matter. I kept rising. Officer candidate school was grueling in a different way than deployment, more mental, more political, but I thrived in it. I learned to strategize, to think in systems, to anticipate needs before they were spoken. I found satisfaction in the discipline of it. It wasn't about being better than anyone else. It was about becoming someone others could depend on, someone I could be proud of when I looked in the mirror. I didn't say much, didn't boast, didn't call home. What was the point? They never asked, and I wasn't in the mood to beg for their curiosity. I watched my peers post their progress on social media, promotions, ceremonies, new bases, family members grinning beside them in uniform. I didn't post mine. I didn't have anyone to stand beside me, not from back home. And that was okay. Not painless, but okay. The people who mattered were the ones in my corner now, the ones who'd served beside me, who knew what I'd given, who respected what I'd built. By the time I made major, I started getting saluted by soldiers older than me, the kind who still had decades of experience but now answered to me. It was strange, humbling, and with each step forward, I kept thinking about how little my family knew. They still thought I was a private, maybe a sergeant at best, if they thought of me at all. Once, Emily posted a photo online of her graduation cap with the caption, "Proud of how far I've come." My mother commented, We always knew you'd make something of yourself. I saw it. Didn't respond. It stung, sure. Not because she was proud of Emily, I didn't begrudge her that, but because there was a time when I would have given anything to hear those words said about me. And now, when I built a career with sweat, scars, and silence, they still didn't care to ask, but I kept climbing. By the time I made lieutenant colonel, people had started mentioning my name in meetings I wasn't in. I'd walk into rooms and feel the air shift, not from fear, but from recognition. I had earned a seat at the table through merit, not legacy. My name was written in official documents, not just on dusty yearbooks or forgotten fridge calendars, and all the while I carried this quiet fire inside me. Not revenge, not bitterness, just a calm kind of power that said, I know who I am, even if you never will. That's the thing about climbing alone. You learn how to build strength that doesn't need to be witnessed. You learn how to lead without applause. And when the time finally comes that the world catches up to who you've become, you're already too strong to care whether they clap or not. It came as a shock, honestly. I hadn't spoken to Emily in over a year when I found out she'd enlisted. Ramos had sent me a message half joking, half stunned saying, "Hey, isn't this your sister?" Along with a blurry screenshot of a basic training group photo from some Facebook post. There she was, same polished face, even under the shaved-down humility of military life, hair tucked, posture stiff, lips pursed into a serious expression I knew was performative. She looked like a girl trying on bravery like a borrowed uniform. Still, I stared at that photo longer than I cared to admit. At first, I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me wanted to laugh, another part wanted to scoff. But deep down, beneath all of that, there was something quieter: confusion, maybe even sadness. Emily had never shown a shred of interest in the military growing up. She used to roll her eyes when I talked about service or strategy or chain of command. She once told me, during one of the rare family gatherings I still went to, that I was wasting my mind on camouflage and orders. Now she wore the same boots I'd once broken in, the same dog tags I'd carried through battle zones. Why? From what I gathered through bits and pieces, mostly secondhand from extended family, Emily had hit a wall, a midlife crisis masked as reinvention. She'd graduated, bounced from job to job, didn't quite know what she was doing. Then one day, she showed up at the recruiter's office, full of pride and Instagram-ready quotes about new challenges and self-growth. My parents were thrilled. Suddenly, they were the proud military family. They started posting flags and folded arm photos. My mother shared a selfie from Emily's first day on base captioned, "Our girl in uniform." So proud of her courage. I remember sitting in my office that night, in full dress, sorting through briefing documents while that photo glared at me from my screen. Our girl in uniform. I wasn't bitter, not in the loud, dramatic way people imagine. It was more like a slow exhale of disbelief. After everything, after the silence, the dismissal, the years I'd spent carving out a life they refused to see, now they had pride. Now, because it came wrapped in Emily. But I didn't reach out. I didn't text or call. I didn't try to explain my silence or ask for hers. I just watched, quiet, observant as always. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even anger, not really. It was more like watching someone walk into a storm you'd already survived and wondering how far they'd get before they realized it wasn't just wind and thunder, that this life had weight, that no matter how many photos you post or how crisp your salute is, it doesn't protect you from what comes after the adrenaline wears off. Still, I felt something else too. A flicker I couldn't name yet. Not hope, not reconciliation, but maybe a doorway opening. Maybe, just maybe, a moment was coming where our paths would cross again, not in opposition, not in silence but face to face, and this time I'd be the one they never saw coming. I found out about the date through a shared connection, someone in Emily's unit who'd served under me once and still followed the chain of command closely. "Ma'am, just thought you should know," the message said, short and respectful. Your sister's graduation ceremony is next week at Fort Monroe. She's in Delta Company. For a few days, I didn't know what to do with that information. I didn't have some grand revenge plan. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. That part of me, the one who used to ache for their recognition, who used to imagine dramatic confrontations and carefully scripted speeches, had long since burned away. But still, something pulled at me. Not spite, not pride even. It was something quieter, deeper. A sense of completion, maybe. Of symmetry. Of finally standing in a room where the weight of my name might be undeniable. So I made arrangements. I didn't tell anyone in advance. I didn't need to. The base already knew who I was. I was listed, authorized, cleared. When I arrived that morning, the sun was just starting to crest over the distant tree line, catching on the polished brass of my insignia. I walked in wearing my full-service dress uniform pressed to precision, medals in place, stars glinting on each shoulder. My boots hit the pavement with the calm, steady rhythm of someone who didn't need to rush to be noticed. I saw them before they saw me. My parents sat toward the front, beaming, dressed in red, white, and blue like they were auditioning for a recruitment commercial. My mother was holding a small bouquet, and my father had his camera ready, already perched on his knee. Their pride practically radiated from their skin. I could almost hear them rehearsing how they'd tell the neighbors. Our Emily is in the army now. Such bravery. Emily stood with the other recruits, posture stiff and chin high. She looked thinner than I remembered, more serious. There was something unfamiliar in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Not fear, but awareness. The knowledge that this life required more than performance. She didn't see me, not yet. Then one of the drill sergeants, Sergeant Reeves, if memory served, spotted me from across the courtyard. His spine straightened like it had been struck by lightning. His face shifted from routine boredom to stunned respect. He raised his hand in a crisp salute. General, ma'am, the words echoed, sharp and unmistakable. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I saw Emily's face twist in confusion before she turned to follow the eyes of the others and saw me. She froze. My parents looked back next. My mother blinked like she couldn't trust what she was seeing. My father's jaw slackened. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just stared, as if I'd risen from the dead. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just stood tall and returned the salute, not to Reeves but to every part of myself that had waited years for this moment. It wasn't revenge. It was truth, and for the first time in my life, they saw it. Time slowed in that courtyard. I had felt adrenaline before on missions and emergencies under fire, but this was different. This wasn't survival. This was exposure. Not the kind that kills you, but the kind that peels something open, quietly and without permission. The drill sergeant's voice cracked as he recovered from his shock and barked out the next order. The graduates straightened, shoes clicking in unison, arms moving like clockwork. Emily followed suit, but I could see the shift in her, subtle, almost imperceptible, but there. Her jaw tightened. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. She didn't look away from me, even when protocol told her she should. I watched her fight her training just to understand who I was now. The ceremony went on, but the energy had changed. I stood at the back, still, hands behind me, my face unreadable. A few officers approached and nodded their respect, but no one dared interrupt. Not with my parents still watching me like I was some strange ghost. The looks on their faces, shock, confusion, a flicker of embarrassment, were almost comical. If they hadn't meant so much. Once, when Emily's name was called, my mother gasped audibly. Emily stepped forward, stiff-backed, face unreadable. She received her certificate, saluted, and returned to formation, but I saw the moment she stole another glance at me. She was trying to make sense of it all, and maybe, deep down, she was trying to decide whether to feel proud or angry, whether to reach toward me or retreat from the part of her life she had never truly known. After the final address, the crowd broke apart, parents rushing forward, recruits hugging their siblings, cameras flashing. I didn't move. I wasn't there for pictures. I was there to stand in my truth, uninvited but undeniable. My father approached first. He walked slowly, as if afraid to get too close to something that had outgrown him. "You're a general?" he asked, like the words themselves were bitter. In his mouth, "Yes, sir," I replied flatly, staring ahead. "Promoted last quarter, commanding 14th Operations Group." He looked as if he might argue his instinct always was, but he said nothing. My mother trailed behind him, bouquet still in her hand, now slightly wilted. "You didn't tell us," she said quietly, almost accusingly. "You never asked." I answered. "It wasn't said with venom, just fact." Years' worth of silence distilled into one honest moment. Emily came over next, slower, more careful. She looked at me like she didn't know whether to hug me or salute me. Her voice, when she spoke, was low and unsteady. "Why didn't you tell me?" I met her eyes. "I didn't think you wanted to know." We stood like that for a while, me in full dress, her in brand new fatigues, our parents hovering in stunned irrelevance. No fireworks, no music, just two sisters finally seeing each other clearly. And then, quietly, Emily raised her hand and gave me a proper salute. "Ma'am," I held her gaze as I returned it. "At ease, soldier." And for the first time in our lives, we stood on the same ground. After the ceremony, we stood in the parking lot like strangers who shared a last name. The heat bounced off the asphalt, and families milled around us, snapping pictures, handing out hugs, calling out lunch plans. My parents hovered just behind Emily, their energy unsure, no longer celebratory, but not exactly apologetic either. My mother kept fidgeting with the ribbon on the bouquet, and my father had his hands shoved deep into his pockets like he might find the right words buried there. Emily looked different up close, not just in uniform, but in the way her eyes had changed, sharper, heavier. There were lines of effort around her mouth that hadn't been there before. Real effort, not performance, the kind you earn when no one's clapping. I knew that look. "So, this is who you are now?" she asked, not with malice, but with the bewildered tone of someone finding a door they hadn't known existed. I nodded. "This is who I've been for a while." She swallowed hard. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "What would I have said, Emily? Hey, remember me? The one you all said was throwing her life away?" Surprise, I outranked the dream. I laughed once, dry and tired. "You didn't want to know." "None of you did." I could have sent letters, emails, pictures, but they would have ended up in the same place all my high school trophies did. The trash. My father winced, just slightly. My mother looked like she might speak, but I held up a hand, not to silence her with authority, but with exhaustion. I wasn't there to fight. I wasn't even angry anymore. There wasn't enough of me left to keep holding that weight. The ache had become something quieter, something like clarity. "You wrote us," she said softly. "Once, during training." I nodded. "And you didn't write back." I didn't know what to say. "That's never stopped you before." The silence after that was real, honest. For once, no one tried to fill it with forced kindness or diluted praise. We just stood in the truth of what had been missed. "I'm proud of you," my mother said eventually, her voice fragile. "Even if we didn't understand your choices." I looked at her then, really looked. There was age in her face I hadn't noticed before. Regret, but not enough to fix what had been broken. Maybe that was the cruelest part of growing up. You reach a point where the apology doesn't change the story. It just adds a postscript. "I didn't do it for you," I said. "I didn't become this to prove anything to anyone. I did it because I had to, because I needed to find out who I was when no one was looking, when no one cared." Emily stepped closer then. She didn't touch me, but her voice softened. "So who are you now?" I looked past her, toward the rows of saluting recruits, the sun flaring off their uniforms, their futures just beginning. And then I looked back at her. "I'm someone who learned how to build a life out of being underestimated." We didn't take a family photo. There was no reunion hug, no dramatic reconciliation framed by sunlight and soft music. After the ceremony, we said a few more words, measured, civil, like neighbors making peace after a long fence dispute. My parents offered a late lunch. I declined. I told them I had meetings, which wasn't exactly true, but not a lie either. I had no appetite for small talk or polite rewrites of a past they'd spent years ignoring. Emily stood beside them, unsure. She didn't follow them to the car right away. She lingered. Her uniform was still fresh, her posture still a little forced, but something in her eyes had shifted. She'd seen me now, not just as her sister, not as the black sheep, the one who left. She'd seen the stars on my shoulders, the salutes I didn't have to earn anymore, and the quiet confidence I wore instead of needing approval. I don't think I understood how hard it is, she said. I tilted my head. Hard isn't the point. Hard doesn't make it noble. It just makes it real. She nodded slowly, chewing on the truth. You think I'll make it? I looked her over, still standing, still trying. That depends. Are you doing this to prove something, or to become something? She didn't answer right away. I respected that. We didn't hug. But when we parted, it wasn't cold. It wasn't closure either. It was something messier. A truce built on recognition. And maybe, if we were lucky, the first stones of something new. My drive back to base was quiet. I didn't turn on music. I let the silence sit beside me like an old companion. I thought about the years I'd spent waiting for their pride, their attention, their words, and I realized I didn't need any of it anymore. What I'd built didn't require applause. The people who mattered saluted when I entered a room, not out of fear, not out of tradition, but out of earned respect. Real, grounded, hard-fought respect. My family still didn't know the full scope of what I'd been through. The deployments, the decisions, the funerals I'd presided over, the young soldiers who died under my command. They didn't know how many times I'd sat alone in my quarters, reading reports long after everyone else had gone to bed, holding the weight of choices that could never be undone. And maybe they never would. Maybe they weren't meant to. The legacy they gave me was silence, neglect, dismissal, but I carried it differently now. I didn't let it define me. I let it fuel me quietly, like an ember buried deep in the chest. I had taken that silence and turned it into something unshakable. I had become the kind of person I once dreamed someone would see, and if they finally saw me now, really saw me, it didn't change who I was. It just reminded me how far I'd come without them, and how far I'd keep going, whether they clapped or not.